Let's talk about our planet's health. It's one of the most critical issues of our time, right? It's this massive topic, and it can feel super complex with all the science and the debate. But what if we could just cut through all that noise? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to break it all down, starting with the core problem and going straight to a clear two-part action plan. So, let's dive in.
And look, let's be really direct about this. The source material puts it perfectly. This isn't some far-off, maybe in the future threat. Global warming is, quote, one of the most serious issues that the world is facing today. That sense of urgency, right now, is exactly why we need to get a clear handle on this.
All right, so here's how we're going to tackle it. First, we'll define our planet's big problem. Then, we'll dig into what's actually causing it. After that, we'll look at the pretty alarming consequences, lay out a two-part action plan, and finally, we'll talk about our next move. Okay, so let's get right to it and start at the very beginning. What is the core problem? I mean, before we can even begin to think about solutions, we have to be absolutely crystal clear on what's really happening to our planet. It all boils down to something called the greenhouse effect. Okay, so think of it like a cozy blanket for the Earth. We have these gases in our atmosphere that trap the sun's heat, which is actually a good thing. It keeps our planet warm enough for life to exist. But here's the catch. We're adding way too many of those gases, making that blanket thicker and thicker, and it's trapping way too much heat. That, in a nutshell, is global warming. So, knowing what's happening naturally leads to the next big question, right? Why is it happening? What's causing this blanket to get thicker? Where are all these extra greenhouse gases coming from? Let's take a look at the root causes. The sources really point to four main drivers. First up, a growing global population. More people means more pressure on our natural resources. And that ties right into the second point, resource exploitation. The more we consume, the bigger the impact on our air quality. Then, of course, you've got the usual suspects, all the emissions from our vehicles and factories. And here's one that might surprise you. Even tourism plays a part, with all the waste it creates and the carbon footprint of just getting around.
But you know what? While all of those things are part of the puzzle, the source material tells us to really zoom in on the two main culprits, the two things that are truly hitting the accelerator on this problem: CO2 emissions and, you guessed it, the widespread loss of our forests, also known as deforestation.
And if we break down those CO2 emissions, a really clear picture starts to form. The biggest source, by far, is burning fossil fuels to generate electricity. Right behind that is transportation, all the gasoline and fuel powering our cars, our trucks, and our planes. And then there's deforestation. This one is so crucial because forests are like giant carbon sponges. So when we cut them down, we're not just losing the trees, we're releasing all that carbon they've stored right back into the atmosphere. So, we've got a warming planet, and we know it's caused by rising emissions. This brings us to the really alarming consequences. We've talked about the what and the why, but now it's time for the so what. Why does any of this actually matter in our daily lives?
Well, the effects are real, and they are serious. We're talking about poor air quality that directly hurts our health. Natural resources becoming harder to find and way more expensive. Sea levels are rising, which threatens entire communities along the coasts. Heat waves are getting more frequent and a lot more intense. And the impact on nature is just devastating. We're seeing wildlife habitats completely destroyed, leading to countless species of plants and animals facing extinction.
Now, believe it or not, awareness of this isn't new. People have been sounding the alarm on this for decades. All the way back in 1962, Rachel Carson's incredible book Silent Spring really opened people's eyes to the dangers of pesticides. That helped kickstart the very first Earth Day in 1970. And fast forward to 2016, the world came together to ratify the Paris Agreement, which was a huge landmark effort to fight climate change together. And the Paris Agreement basically took this huge global effort and focused it on one critical goal: to keep the global temperature rise this century well below 2 degrees Celsius. That number, 2 degrees, is a really clear scientific benchmark that pretty much the entire world is now aiming for. Okay, so this brings us to the hopeful part of our story, the action plan. Because let's face it, knowing about the problem is one thing, but the real question is, what can we actually do about it? And the solution really comes down to this idea of shared responsibility. It's split between governments and us as individuals. On one side, you have governments who have the power to make these massive, large-scale changes, right? Investing in renewable energy like solar and wind, passing laws to limit emissions, that kind of thing.
But on the other side, we have incredible power in our daily choices, taking the bus, choosing products with less packaging, recycling, and just making small lifestyle changes to cut down on energy.
In fact, let's make that even more concrete. Here are 4 super simple things anyone can start doing today. Opt for a bus, a train, or even a bike instead of driving alone. Turn off lights and electronics when you're not using them. It's a classic for a reason. Be more mindful of packaging when you're out shopping. And hey, if you can, plant a tree. These might seem like small things, but when they're multiplied by millions and millions of people, they create huge, significant change. And all of that brings us to our final section. So what is our next move? We've walked through the problem, the causes, the effects, and the solutions. So where does that leave all of us? Well, here's the key takeaway. The problem is, without a doubt, incredibly serious, but the path forward isn't some big mystery. It's actually pretty clear. It requires this coordinated, two-pronged attack. Large-scale policy from our governments working hand in hand with the conscious, daily choices made by every single one of us. So I'll leave you with this one final, really important question to think about. If we understand the problem this clearly, and we literally have a detailed roadmap of the solutions right in front of us, what do you think is truly